Thanks for joining us. So with me today is Mr. Chris Kane, and Chris Kane is the VP of Sales and Marketing here at AudioControl. Thanks for coming with us today, Chris. A lot of you guys probably know Chris or have maybe met him before or something like that. So with that today, I just kind of wanted to bring some of the AudioControl home side to a lot of you guys that may not be that familiar with it. Some of you know that we have a busy home and custom install side of our business, and some of you have no idea we did anything but car audio. So I thought it would be kind of fun to bring on somebody that knows a whole lot more about that stuff than I do, and we could kind of talk about some of the home audio and how some of that translates into the car audio world as well. So with that, let's kick it off. And for those of you that don't know Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been with the company, and a little about your history?
Wow.
Lots to talk about, right?
Good question, exactly. So, no, I've been really honored and blessed to be with AudioControl for almost 29 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lengthy time.
Long time,
so,
yep.
Yeah, so I'm a lifer, I guess, in that regard. So, but no, I've always been kind of an audio enthusiast. You know, going back to you know, when I was in high school and growing up in Southern California, you know, we were the guys that would go to Leo Stereo and buy a 6x9 4-ways and low powered EQs and put those into our systems and such. So I really liked that kind of thing and got the bug from there.
Sure.
And then that led me to a tour of duty at a couple of independent shops in Southern California.
Okay.
I actually worked for Alan Ed's in Southern California.
Very cool.
Eddie K. hired me there, so I got a chance to know guys like Eddie and Kelly McDaniel and John Haynes and all that kind of early on in their career. So
watched a lot of the Eddie K videos and heard a lot of the CDs in my younger years of training and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool.
We were kind of the test ground for Eddie. You know, Eddie would try his material on us.
Gotcha.
He was the VP of sales for Alan Ed, so he would try his Eddie stuff on us, and we'd go, "Oh, that's cool," or Eddie, I
don't know about that.
So, but yeah, years later, I mean, obviously, you learned a lot from that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Fun days of retail, and our audio was just you know, a real thing to go. One of the guys I went to high school with, his uncle owned a stereo store in the valley called Sound Station, which is a real famous place at the time. And Danny and Larry was scary. And Larry always had new gear in his car.
Gotcha.
You know, so I was going to college for accounting. Larry always had gear in his car. So
college for accounting meets car stereo.
Exactly. So somewhere along the way, one of the car stereo shops realized they needed someone to manage the place and do the book. So I got involved in that, and then I started getting more involved and realized that 6x9s and little boxes in the backseat of the car weren't the way to go. So anyways, that kind of led to bigger and better things, and then to my tour of duty with Alan Ed's, and learned certainly a lot from there. And then Southern California, early 90s, it was time to move on to something else. We got an opportunity to move up here to Seattle to work for this company that I kind of knew a little bit about. You know, and I, like a lot of people, I think it was more of a car audio company than a home, but I learned when I got up here.
Sure.
And up I came. You know, we figured, we'll try this out for a few years and see what happens. And 29 years later, I'm get to work with some amazing people, with some really, really cool products.
Awesome.
You know, and just stay connected with all these people over time.
Yeah,
so
that's very cool. Yeah. So you worked in a few different audio shops. So were you always on the sales side or the install side? Did you do a little bit of all of it, or what was more your role there?
But I was probably more sales.
Okay.
I mean, I learned to do install along the way, you know, and inevitably you're out there helping people out with their cars and doing smaller stuff. And then I kind of became the install guy for my friends.
Okay.
And then my kids,
of course.
And then my kids' friends, you know, and stuff like that. So, and I built a box or two in my life.
Okay.
Like
all right. Fair enough.
When I came here, I became an expert more on level matching.
Gotcha.
Using RTAs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was kind of the main skill set.
Yeah. So speaking of RTAs and that sort of thing, so take us through some of the kind of history of AudioControl and you know, where some of this stuff got its start, and you know, did it start with home? Did it start with car? How does some of this bleed over? Where do we start?
Wow, that's a long, you know.
I know, that's a lot, right?
Let's go back to Seattle in the 70s.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't there then, but
actually,
AudioControl was originally started by a guy named Greg Mackey, and Greg ran a company called Tapco that made little mixers and EQs and stuff you would see at restaurants and skating rinks. And that. And then he sold that company, and he had a lot of engineering friends who liked processing and things like that. And they said, hey, what's available in the hi-fi market? And I say hi-fi because it was hi-fi back then. Now I say hi-fi. You think I'm old, but back then it was hi-fi or stereo store or whatever it was. And it was all mainly retail then. And people would buy speakers and take them home, and it would sound, you go into the store and there'd be some big towers and they're playing Dark Side of the Moon and there'd be shag carpet and stuff like that. And they'd go, oh, this sounds pretty good. And then they would take them home and they would have hardwoods or glass or whatever, they shove them in the corners and they would sound different. And of course they go back to the hi-fi store.
Of course.
Say, what's going on here? And a lot of it was the acoustics, obviously, the way the speakers are reacting with the room, the listening position, and all those things. And a lot of that stuff hasn't changed at all today.
Absolutely.
I look at it as a car is like a really complicated house. Like a car is almost like listening to stereo in your bathroom. When you think about it, you're kind of in the spot. That's a good analogy. That's absolutely true. You can't move.
A lot of hard surfaces, a lot of glass, a lot of reflecting stuff.
Speakers are there. But equalization, the early ones, Greg and the guys came up with a 520B, which was this little box that had 5 EQ bands on it. Very reminiscent of the 4.1 a little bit, but a little bigger with a couple of pieces of wood bolts on it. And that was sold to the hi-fi store. You might have a picture of that floating around there somewhere.
See what I've got here.
These are still in high demand. So. But that product was sold in a lot of the retail stores. And then that led to people saying, hey, that's kind of cool, but how do I set it up? So that led them to develop an RTA, and then built into we had a standalone RTA, and then we had one built into the C101, which is kind of a famous home product we sold for a number of years. Mind you, this was all kind of retail at that time. And then, as that business grew, and then Greg sold the company to a gentleman named Tom Walker, and then Tom kind of took it to the next phase, kind of engineering-oriented modes and stuff like that. And we actually had people taking some of the home products in the mid-'80s and shoving them into the trunks of the car.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Hey, I need and that's where kind of there's an epicenter story there someday. Where the phase couple activator, which was the original home processor, became in the trunk of a car, which then subsequently became this little-known product called the epicenter.
Nobody's ever heard of that.
It's a new up-and-comer. We're gonna get one today. So, so that's how, all of a sudden the attraction, hey, there's car audio interest out there. So the team got back and said, let's take a lot of the acoustical stuff we know about and the audio performance on home, and let's roll, high voltages and stuff, and roll that into the car products. And so we built the EQXs and the EQLs and 2XSs, and that kind of grew from there. And then that car business kind of became a kind of different directions, and then along came sound off contests. Some of you guys may remember, the IASCA days, which were really good stuff. And how that drove the business. And then that fed into things like some of the early OEM integration stuff we did with L's and X's and 2I's, and then subsequently to DB drag racing. Along
I remember DB drag. I used to go to those DB drags in the Circuit City parking lots and that sort of thing here in Washington anyway.
That was fun. That was great. Got people really enthusiastic.
Gets you excited.
Sold a lot of woofers, I think.
Sold a lot of woofers, a lot of line drivers probably.
Exactly. Gain and stuff like that. And then along from that kind of grew into a little bit more into OEM integration. And actually, we'll talk about OEM integration a little bit, but we started that type of stuff back in 92, 93. So, and then the home side, kind of took its own direction in the early 90s, where, the traditional hi-fi shops were selling products, and clients were saying, hey, you know what? If you can come out to my house and help set this up, maybe I'll buy some more speakers, or can you help me with, the whole house audio? And some of that early stuff was actually car stereo speakers. Or kind of interesting walls and stuff.
Because there probably wasn't really a true in-ceiling back then or anything like that.
Boston Acoustic had some home speakers.
I mean, even today, the speakers I have in my ceiling in my living room, when I bought them, I'm looking at this going, this is a 6.5-inch coax. This could easily be a car speaker. It just has a much better crossover network on the back. But otherwise, I'm looking at it going, this is just a coax with a trim on it. I mean, pretty much anyway.
The bracket and a white grill.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds great, but I'm looking at the basics of it going, so makes sense.
A lot of core speaker technology. Kind of triples its way into that.
Makes sense.
But that led us to start developing more of our custom home products. So, and people liked equalization and the benefits because, hey, especially when you start putting multiple speakers in the ceilings and the walls and all that kind of stuff, and now outdoor spaces, but they needed the acoustical thing. And I remember going out to a dealer and talking about it, and they said, and we need to be able to fit it into a rack. I went, cool. I go, what's a rack?
Right.
So, and you got introduced to things like this, where clients were putting that kind of stuff in their houses, and a lot of gear was hidden away in a closet or equipment rack or whatnot.
Sure.
So that's where we said, well, let's take some of those features and functions that everybody likes,
and
let's start building that into various products like amplifiers and processors and things like that.
Sure, makes
and
sense.
then custom business, just organizations like CEDIA took off, and Infocom, and then more and more companies kind of got involved in that. So we started seeing a different direction. So, I mean, to your first point, a lot of people would say, oh, I know you guys as a car audio company, because, if you bought stuff back in the 70s from a Roger Sound Lab or a Magnolia Hi-Fi or something like that, you would see car at home. But now, mobile audio guys, I mean, in doing cars, I mean, the amount of skill that's necessary to do the fabrication, the wiring, the measurement, I mean, guys like you know, do that stuff all day. It's much different than it used to be. Definitely a skill set. And the challenge for home, same kind of thing. Now all of a sudden you're putting stuff in people's houses, and you're hiding wires in the ceilings. And things like that.
Yeah, and it's no longer just 5.1 in a TV. Now it's, I want the lighting integrated and the curtains and the security system and the cameras and the audio. It's this whole a whole ecosystem, I guess I should call it, of all these things that all kind of play nice together.
It's technology. I mean, the AV installers in homes these days are not necessarily just for the AV installers or technologists, because they've got networks, for instance, which 5 or 10 years ago we came out with a network amp, and a lot of dealers were a little reluctant to be the network guys, but now they got to own the network.
Yeah, they have to.
They got to be the ones to manage that, because everything's going to live on the network. The amplification can live on the network in terms of connectivity, the lighting, everything you mentioned, camera, security, all those components.
It's a whole other world there.
Exactly.
So, with some of the car side of things a little bit before we dive into more of the home stuff. So, did you ever have a hand in like a specific product coming out? Was there something that was your baby?
Well, you know what? We have a great team here, so I work with everybody. But I think the first thing that I got a chance to spearhead was the in-dash, which was the 4.1.
Oh, very cool.
So, and when I got here, we didn't have an in-dash piece.
No in-dash pieces.
No, we didn't do in-dashes, and that was it. A lot, and there's a lot of good ideas out there that come honestly from dealers.
Of course.
So, and guys out there, hopefully there's 3 or 4 of them. Call on
hey, there's 23 of them.
23
so
people.
There's lots of them.
I have a lot of them.
Yeah.
But no, there was, we had a great reputation for, trunk mount and processing and things of that nature. But in the front of the car, we weren't in that part of the business.
Sure.
And I'd actually sold an EQ by a company called Monolithic. You guys remember that back in the 80s and 90s? It was a killer preamp, and that's really where I learned about high voltage.
Gotcha.
And I said, God, we really need to have something that fits into that. So we spent some time with the engineering department. And I actually went out and got pieces of clay to mold what the knobs are going to look for.
Interesting.
Because, nowadays you just put that on a 3D printer.
Sure, of course.
So it was
but back then that wasn't a thing.
Oh yeah,
so,
exactly. The first one you had to be right on.
Yeah,
like so
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we took things that honestly we did really well with, like high voltage and equalization controls, talking to dealers. We came up with a cool form factor. For the in-dash piece, and hence the first 4.1, and then the 4.1i, and then the 3.2.
And it's funny how a product like that, for example, started way back when, and then it got to a point where every company made in-dash products. I mean, all the big guys, every car audio brand you could think of had some sort of in-dash offering, if not multiple in-dash offerings. But now we've kind of come full circle again to where really the only high quality in-dash offerings are maybe us and a couple sprinkled in between. But for the most part, everybody else is they kind of started to focus on head units and things like that instead. But now it's kind of coming full circle again, where head units are maybe not nearly as important. And you and I were talking the other day about how we are kind of the head unit now. With OEM integration and that sort of thing, that's kind of the path we're headed down. So it's an interesting world.
There was always we call it the 10 times rule. Something was 10 times better than what was there. You would get people's traction, and they'd want to get it. So like when there was a jump from cassette to CD, as you remember what cassettes are.
Sure.
But the sound performance of cassette to CD was huge.
Right.
And then interfacing became huge. But all of a sudden now you have factory source units that have steering wheel volume control and Bluetooth capabilities and navigation and all those things. So the need to change that piece in a car these days is not as strong. And in some cases, it's super
nearly impossible in some.
It's shallow and all that.
Yeah.
But people are still saying, wow, you know what? I do listen to my system, and you know what? I still want to have better bass. I still want better sound. I want more power. You know, so you know, there's a lot of that. You know, flashes back to the early days of teaching people about sound quality and appreciating that. And you know, we've got a whole nother opportunity now because all of a sudden with streaming audio, you know, and high res options, things through phones and all that kind of stuff, you can put a lot more music into a car rather than have that one CD. And if you wanted more than one CD, you'd have to have a CD changer.
Right. Now that was really, now you're really talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the ones where you shove them in there.
Yeah.
We used to sell cassette changers.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, you know.
Now that's something I don't think I've ever seen in person. I installed a fair bit of CD changers, sold a lot of them, but cassette changer, that's predating me a little bit. So
hats off to the engineers.
Yeah,
who figured out how to make it, you know, move it around.
A lot of moving parts to make that happen.
Quite a bit. So, but no, the 4.1 was just kind of a fun product.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, people loved it because once again, high voltage.
Right.
You know, and back then you had a lot of amplifiers that like to have 2 to 5 to 7 volts.
Sure.
And the radios were like 100 to 300 millivolts. So preamps like EQLs and X's were huge. And then the 4.1 came out, and that just all of a sudden amplifiers. People would have a system that they're somewhat happy with, and they put a line driver and a preamp in there. Oh my gosh.
Night and day.
Totally different. Totally different.
Yeah. And I think that relates to the home audio world too. I mean, I think we've kind of come full circle in that somewhat too, because it was, you know, like we were talking about earlier, hi-fi and 2-channel systems and this and that, and then everybody kind of got into home theater and okay, well, small speakers are cool and let's place speakers all around the room, but let's get them smaller, inner ceilings and this and that. And now we're kind of back to, and then, you know, one step further, okay, let's make it portable. Everybody's got a Bluetooth speaker, everybody's got a Sonos, everybody's got an Apple HomePod or whatever it is. But what do all those things lack, right? They all lack sound quality. They all lack detail and bass and all the things that really deep down we love, but people are giving up and compromising that for size, just like we did with iPods and MP3s and all those things rather than CDs, you know? And now we're kind of coming full circle again. Now it's like, you know what? No, I do want my house to sound really good. I'm not happy with this little Bluetooth speaker. So talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about some of the cool products and things. And this one comes to mind for me on some of that stuff, but I don't know this stuff nearly as well as I do. So for the guys out there that don't know what we do on the home side that well, or the CI side, just give us a brief overview of kind of what do we offer in that realm.
Sure, yeah. No, and you make great points, Matthew. I mean, you know, the home side of things, especially with custom install, went from sound in every room to now guys want music in every room.
Right,
you know,
right.
And they want performance audio.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, people, when they thought of sound in every room, would be like a dentist office, you know, like
yeah, just a little bit of music coming out of the ceiling.
You know, music and stuff like that. But now, I mean, the expectations and the experiences people can get with the music that you can get available, you know, is huge.
Sure.
And there are speaker options too that, you know, in walls were this, now we have in walls, in ceilings, things like that are amazing. You know? So that's but things like this need power.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, and I think one of the mainstays of where we came with on the home side was, well, let's take some of the features and functions and things that people like, and let's make sure there's amplification power there. So a lot of early distributed audio amplifiers came out that were small and tiny, and they would be 30 watts or 50 or whatever. You know, there's marketing watts versus engineering watts. You know, all that kind of stuff. So they put it on there, and then they would turn it up, and it would sound like this or whatever. So very compromised. So you know, the guys spent a lot of time with our early amplification products, putting a lot of power in there and matching up with equalization and such. So the early line, for instance, we have, you know, and there's 2 or 3 sides, I guess, within the home side, is our distributed audio amplifiers. We have a series called the Architects. Okay. And the Architects are standalone amplifiers with the equalization built into it. And the original Architects, I think, were 4 or 5U, and then the 3U, and then the 2U, and now we have some that are 1U. Right. And the U, by the way, is 1.75 inches for you. Our audio
for us car guys that don't know.
Car guys, exactly. So, and there's no fictitious 0U, you know, amplifier that I know of. So.
Gotcha.
But we're allowed to put a lot of power inside those, and that power level can then be distributed to different channels. So the Architect series, gives you that power level, and we're running typically 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms, and double that into 4 ohms.
Which in the home world is a lot of power.
It's huge.
I mean, in the car world, that's, as is not that crazy, but in the home world, that's a lot of power.
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need a lot.
Sure.
You don't need tons of power to run speakers,
right?
But the headroom and the bottom end, it's kind of like taking a car, like a 4-cylinder car and pulling a trailer.
Sure.
It'll work.
Right. Will it do it?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't really want to.
Yeah, it's much better to have an 8-cylinder with horsepower and stuff like that.
Right.
Amplification power, and even in distributed audio too, because sometimes early on I would hear people go, well, it's just background music. Well, it went from being background music to being the mainstay. Sure. This is what I'm going to listen to in my den. Yeah. And now, hey, I can have speakers all over my house, so I want to listen to that in my outdoor space. I want to listen to that in the office, the bedroom, and all that. And everybody can say, well, how loud do you want to listen to it? They'll tell you not that loud, but they really do.
Well, of course. Well, you have parties or whatever, have people over, and sometimes you just have to overcome noise. Not even necessarily that you wanted to hear it that loud, but you need to have a certain volume because you got 20 people in the house or whatever. I mean, sometimes you need that. So
music is emotional too. Just like when you're parked with a car and you turn it up so your friends can hear it. Right. It's nice to be able to be in in your house and be able to turn it up, at night or with your friends or whatever, and have that same kind of experience. So absolutely, those are the kind of things. So power has always been one of the things you see, from our Architect series, which are the bass amplifiers with equalization controls. And the cool thing about the EQ on the front of it, it's a simple EQ, so it's almost based on the 520B when you go back full circle, where you can go back and say, hey, I want to go in and fine tune the sound. So the client likes hey, they're going to come in and personalize what's going on. Sure. And then the installer who's on the job, and he's putting speakers in. Let's face it, sometimes speakers go in great locations, and sometimes they go in the corner or whatever. Yeah. They need some calibration that goes on there. So the equalizations in the Architect definitely helps from that side of things. So that's been really kind of a mainstay with what we're doing. Like I said, those models have gotten, the engineers or the team here are pretty cool. I mean, they can take things and get smaller, we get more power, and get things out of them.
So, something that used to be a 4U is now a 1U with more power.
Exactly.
Which is, just awesome.
And then that's kind of led to, products like this. This is the Rialto series. Okay. And this is definitely one that came from feedback we got from dealers over time. Gotcha. And they came to us and said, hey, we like your amplifiers, but, we're also using more sources now that have like digital audio outputs. Right. Like Sonos Connects or streaming devices and autonomics and stuff like that. So it'd be cool if next generation of amps had, digital inputs and other various features and stuff like that. Yeah. And you go, wow, okay, so we mock something up and it takes up the table. Yeah, of course. Kind of stuff, this big, huge thing. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And they go, well, we mentioned to you that we want to hide it. Of course. And you're like, okay, that escaped us. Sure. So it was good to be able to say, all right, well, let's talk to the dealers. And we came up with a couple different form factors. And actually, we looked at like an Apple Time Machine, and Connect, and some other things. And we were able to come up with this little platform here for the Rialto series, which is really, really cool. This is something that kind of interested me from when I first started working here was the Rialto. I just think it's a really cool product, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. You know what I mean? And I'm not a home audio or home theater expert by any means, but I'm an enthusiast on that side of things, and I've just never seen anything exactly like it. It's very, very cool. I've got it up on the screen so everybody can see more of a kind of an up close view of the back of these things. But I have never seen something so packed with so many features and inputs and outputs in something that size. To give you guys an idea, I mean, you're seeing this on the desk here, size-wise, you got a phone on here or something perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's the size of, a couple of iPhones, about 3 iPhones wide. I mean, it's really, really small. Such a cool little platform. And just like you see on your screen, that we make them in black and white, all that good stuff. But yeah, so tell us a little bit more about something like this. And we make this a couple of different ways, right? Yeah, well, there's a Rialto 400 and 600. Okay. The differences being the 600 has an integrated amp, so it's got a volume controls, and you can turn the levels up and down and stuff like that, whereas the 400 series is a dedicated amplifier. Okay. So, and when I say dedicated, meaning you would feed a signal into it, like you plug your streaming device in here, and the streaming device would have the volume control from that. So,
Got it.
and then the nice thing about it is it's got analog and digital ends. So a lot of like televisions, for instance, have digital audio outputs now.
Yeah, use the optical out, something like
Exactly.
that.
So you can get the best audio performance that comes from that standpoint.
Very cool.
You can match this up and make it a little subwoofer amplifier if you
Oh,
want to.
right.
It's bridgeable. And your point about power, I always love going to show this to a dealer or a client, and then they'll want to bring out some small bookshelf speakers.
Sure.
Come up.
Yeah.
And you'll go, okay, well, what else you got?
Yeah, you got a set of towers
Let's
around?
go to mid yeah. So we've had, really big Magplanners kind of speakers hooked up to this. Now, if someone's going to buy $15,000 worth of speakers, I would probably sell them on something a little more, maybe like an Avalon, for instance, or something like that. But for under $1,000, right? The power level, the digital audio inputs, it's pretty cool.
I think the first time I actually heard this was upstairs here at AudioControl, and there was a couple of towers up there. I don't know exactly what they were. I think there were some Dynaudios or something like that, but some really nice towers. And this is sitting on a table with these two towers on either side of it. I'm going, really? That little guy with those? And sure enough, they fired up. And I'm like, wow, that thing's incredibly powerful. And the fact that you could stack two of these on top of each other and make a 2.1 setup is really, really cool. What a great idea. And then these have that awesome digital input that switches or something, right?
Well, it has a priority input. So we can prioritize whether it's digital or analog. Okay. And that's on the 400, and then on the 600, is that what you're showing there?
The 400 is what's on the screen there. So tell us, before you go on there, tell us what the priority input is for. I know what it's for, but tell them, what do you do with the priority input?
No, with priority input, you can pick, what's the most important source. So when you walk into the room, for instance, your television could be playing through this, and you're listening to music, and then maybe you have a music server plugged into it also. Sure. So when you first turn it on, which input should it look for? Should it look for the analog input, or should it look for the digital input?
Gotcha.
So the priority switch will allow us to select that. So it looks for that. And if it doesn't see a signal on that input, then it goes to the secondary input. Pretty cool. So kind of a nice little thing. Right. And there's actually, a little shout out to the car where there's an AccuBase circuit in here.
I was going to ask, is there anything that crosses over?
So for those of you who've never heard of AccuBase, and which is a nice shelving frequency, because a lot of times this does get matched up with smaller speakers.
Yeah, some bookshelf speakers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in home audio, a lot of times you may or may not have standalone subs, although we're seeing more and more of the subwoofers. So the AccuBase gives you that extra little oomph bass response down there, and your smaller speakers can all of a sudden sound larger and bigger, things like that. So pretty cool. And so I've seen some demos with this where they were using like an Alexa or something with it, and using the priority for that, right? Yeah, there's the 1/8-inch jack input right here is labeled priority. We can actually plug an Alexa in here, so which is the voice thing from Amazon. Hopefully, it's working its way out there. So you're playing your music, and you activate Alexa, and it automatically interrupts the music, right? Okay, and how fast is that switch? Oh my! That's the coolest thing. I love that. So it interrupts the music, does your Alexa stuff. She tells you the weather or whatever, and then instantly switches back to your music. And that way, it's not that lag time. Right. Stuff like well, now your Alexa's coming through these great bookshelf speakers or whatever you have it hooked up to. That's pretty slick, and that kind of brings to kind of the full circle thought in my mind is we talked about how we all had hi-fi and 2-channel and all this stuff. Everybody went to home theater, then we got into iPods, and now everybody's getting back into maybe Atmos systems and these big theater systems. But the other thing that I see coming back, even with the younger generation, is hi-fi, 2-channel systems, turntables, something like that. What better product to have than this? You can have your record collection, and you can have your couple of nice bookshelves and maybe a active sub or whatever, but you can still have your Alexa and have the modern features and have all the cool stuff, but still retain that kind of minimalist, aesthetic and stuff. What a cool way to do it all in one small piece. It's so cool. Yeah, when I grew up, so but we would have the one stereo, which would be a receiver, and it would have a cassette on the front, maybe a turntable on the top, kind of thing, whatever, and a couple of speakers, and that would be in one room of the house. Sure. That's how most people were. Maybe you had a second one in the living room or whatever, and then when you got to college, you might get something you take along, like a little bookshelf or a boom box. People remember putting stuff on their shoulders. That was just always blew me away as an interesting thing and stuff. So, but you're right, now people want music everywhere, and with things like this, you have your music, you have your content with you. It's not like the one CD, or carrying the big 500 book of CDs like I had in high school,
So yeah, so we've got it with us. It's just a matter of still making it sound good and filling the house with sound.
Yeah, and I want to plug in, and my kids' friends come over and they log on to our house through the Bluetooth or the Alexa or whatever, and they play their music through the house, and then they leave.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, I don't want to take all day and talk about one product, but I do think it also lends itself really well to how a lot of people live today. Right. Not everybody has this huge house. Not everybody has this big room that they can do home theater in. Some people need a 2-channel.
Not everybody has a rack.
Not everybody has a rack, right? I mean,
but you should get one.
But there's a lot of people who live in condos or apartments or whatever, and they can't do that stuff. They can't put speakers in the ceiling, but it doesn't mean that they can't have good audio, right? And previously, I feel like that was kind of the case. You either had a rack or this big home stereo or whatever, or you had what was your other option? A sound bar?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's those are always pressures when you do some of the smaller Bluetooth speakers. I went in my kid's bathroom one day and looked in the shower and they had a little Bluetooth suction to the wall. I went, oh my gosh, what is that? So yeah, there are ways to create sound,
right?
And then there are ways to create music.
And I think that's a really good way to say it. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you just want sound or do you want music?
Exactly.
Those are two different things. So
and I think that's a huge opportunity now because between the Pandoras and the Titles and the Deezers and all the streaming services, you can play all sorts of high res capability music, and not just eclectic stuff. We all had that test disc.
Of course, right? But it sounded really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
Now you can listen to a lot of different things for that. So, and this is this is a perfect example. It gets everybody in there, in terms of the size and such. And it's got another brother called the Bijou, which is kind of the same power. And then we kind of went through and filleted it a little bit and took it and put it side by side. So the Bijou is a 1U half rack wide, once again 1.75, about 7 inches wide.
Right.
And the idea behind that, this is one you're probably going to display maybe on your cabinet, dresser, living room, and stuff like that. The Bijou is something that would probably end up in your rack. I think we have one in the rack over there.
Yep.
But it's also one of those things that could go behind your TV.
Absolutely.
Because there is one of the trends these days is people like the performance, but they don't have to see the gear.
Yeah, they don't want to necessarily.
Yeah. A little bit like mobile audio. I mean, mobile audio for a long time was trophy trunks.
Right.
Let's load it all
up.
I
want to pop the trunk and show it all off. And now it's kind of gone through that stealth. I want everything to look OEM,
Keep it all hidden away.
Yeah. And so I'm showing a picture of the Bijou for everybody up on the screen right now. So that, you guys, is the Bijou sitting vertically. So that would be mounted like in between the studs in the wall behind your TV. Or something like that. How cool is that? And we have all the accessories, right?
We have a back box that goes in the wall, so that can fit in the wall. So you can actually put that and a Apple TV or
and all put it in the wall.
Like
That's super cool, especially with a lot of the kind of minimalist aesthetics in a lot of homes today. A lot of more modern homes. They don't want to see any of it. They want a TV hanging on the wall that looks like a picture, and we don't want to see any of the gear at all if we can help it. What a cool way to kind of integrate that in there.
Yeah, so you look online and on Craigslist and offer up home theater furniture.
Right. Yeah.
People are trying to get the furniture out.
Yeah.
They want the sound,
right?
Which is cool. And it's kind of because of what distributed audio and how you do music, all of a sudden the customers, there's that many more customers.
Right.
It used to be maybe one person in the house made a decision, go to the store, come home, and say, I want a CD player.
Right.
Now everybody wants the music.
Of course.
But they all want to have good speakers and sound throughout their house.
Yeah.
And you got to have. We don't all have racks and bedrooms and stuff. So the Bijou is a perfect solution for that. And that's got volume control up and down. And that one's kind of cool because it's got multiple inputs too.
Oh, very
So
cool.
I could plug in, 2 or 3 different things and has remote control.
Just to switch between the inputs.
Exactly.
Yeah. So not a full receiver, but you do have volume control and source control.
Yep.
So I mean, it's close. It's a simplified receiver.
In the home world, it's an
integrated amplifier.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you've got volume, and then you've got source selection, and then.
And in a lot of situations, what more do you need?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because a lot of times the source music is now coming vis-a-vis your television.
Right.
A lot of the streaming services do that. And you may have a standalone server or a Connect or one of those Sonos products.
Something like that.
Or some of the high-res stuff that's out there. So.
And if they do have a rack, we have the rack mounts for the Bijous as well, right? So you can put 2 of them next to each other and all sorts of metal for the
put them next to each other. We can make them next with a blank plate.
Very
cool.
cool.
Make them in a back box. We got it where it goes behind that, but I call it the hotel mounts.
The hotel mount.
The cabinet below the TV.
I like that. That's a good way to describe it. So let's see here. I'll pull up some of the comments here too, and let's see. some people have got some questions for you. So what's your favorite old school audio product? Now, old school can mean a lot of things, but what's your favorite one? Let's say old school is something we don't make anymore. How's that?
Audio control product?
Yeah,
or just
favorite audio control product that we don't make anymore.
You don't make.
Because I mean, the Epicenter is an easy choice, right? But I don't consider that old school because it's still current. You know what I mean? And it's still something that's viable for a lot of new cars. But what's something that we used to make?
Well, here's one. If anybody can recognize it, the MVC.
MVC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably never.
I'm not familiar.
Okay. So master volume control.
Okay.
And the idea there was you had a lot of source units. We were trying to get the maximum voltage out of the radio, and let's face it, the radios could only put out 300 millivolts or 500 or whatever.
Sure. Or
in some cases 1 or 2. And Eclipse came out with a higher voltage one. So the idea was you could turn up the source unit all the way. So you get, because output voltage varies based on volume of radio. So we're going to turn that all the way.
Okay.
And then we can go back to the amplifier gain in the back and turn the gains all the way down. So you're going to get maximum signal to noise.
Sure.
But there was no volume control in between.
Right.
Okay. So the MVC was basically a 3-in, 3-out preamp.
Interesting.
That would allow you to attenuate the volume between the radio and multiple amplifiers.
That's pretty cool.
So it was a neat level control, but it became somewhat misunderstood,
right?
Because people just, why don't I just put more line drivers and do things like that?
Sure.
And then it found its way in the DB drag world. And all of a sudden, people wanted to control multiple amplifiers.
Sure.
Have one knob on it and stuff
Makes
like
sense.
that. So
makes perfect sense.
It was a very fun product like that. But it certainly took some time for people to understand it.
Yeah. Sometimes things are ahead of their time.
Oh,
totally. That sounds like one of those things. Let's say a home product as well. Favorite home product?
Oh my gosh, that would probably have to be the C101.
C101.
And that was.
See if I have a picture of that one.
Yeah, and that was the first. A big part of audio control is measurement and correction.
Right.
And when we made that first EQ, that predated me too. But
gotcha.
I realized early on, people said, "Hey, how do I set this?"
Sure.
Okay. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Right.
So we had this EQ with sliders and knobs, and no way to really kind of set it. So
that's one of these ones here.
Right there.
This one here.
Yeah, that one right there.
Okay. So we'll bring this up and I'll share that with everybody so they can see it as well.
And that's gone through various versions with pieces of wood on the side also, which is a very Washington thing and all that. But you had an analyzer with a microphone.
Right.
So it would measure, basic frequency stuff. It wasn't doing time delay or level or, things that Ken Ward likes to do, So, but it's just basic frequency for identifying peaks and dips in rooms and stuff like that. And then the analyzer would show you what you were seeing, and then you can use the EQ to make the fine tuning and adjustment from there.
That's pretty cool. So this is the piece on the bottom we're talking about. Okay.
Exactly.
So the one that you guys are all seeing on the screen, it's the piece on the bottom. So that's one of your favorites from the past.
People love the flashing lights.
Yeah, of course. Everybody loves a good RTA or spectrum analyzer of some sort.
I think it got a cameo in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh.
Remember at the end of the show when he throws the baseball?
Yeah.
Always seen that. I think that's a C101.
That's pretty cool.
So
that's pretty
cool. It's a
cool.
celebrity product.
Right.
All the
it's celebrity endorsed at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But that whole idea of the C101, so when we built the first car products, like the EQL and the EQX, once again, people went, cool, here's this thing with all these knobs. Okay, how do I set it?
Right. What do I do with it?
What do I do with it?
Yeah.
So that C101 idea, actually, we showed it as a 30-band RTA at CES back in, I don't know, 86 or 87 or something like that. And that was the original 3050, which then took another year and a half to really come to fruition.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. This is it. So that kind of led to that.
So somebody, Brett had mentioned those little guys are seriously impressive. I run 2 of them on my patio, which run to some marine RF wake towers and 2 12-inch subs. Talking about these little guys.
Nice.
That's a pretty cool use for those. I love that. Sounds like we're going to South Africa for a pool party concept. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that Brett? Hey, Brett.
Yep, that's pretty awesome. So somebody had asked, how would you compare the Bijou to the Sonos amp?
Well, Sonos is a streaming content company.
Sure.
So, and one of the things about our company is we're an amplifier company that builds amplifiers.
Right. Yeah. We make everybody's stuff sound good.
We tend to make everybody's stuff. So inevitably, our amplifiers have more power, than most of those amplifiers that are out there, and more bandwidth, flexibility, and such. So whereas a Sonos amp, I think, has a Sonos streamer built into it. Yeah. But you tend to be limited in terms of the power output. Is very limited. This is a lot more flexible in terms of what you can add. So you can match it up with bigger speakers. Sure. And you know, much like car audio, and we can get into a whole class about amplifier measurements.
Right.
You know, for instance, I mean, our amps put out 100 watts per channel. You know, there are other companies that will say it's 100 watts at forums.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And
that's total power.
One channel.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But when you break it into 8 channels, or if you break it into lower impedances or things like that, all of a sudden those numbers drop 20, 30 watts or whatever. And then you get into impedances too. You load it up with speakers. You know, you can play down to 4 ohms. And it's bridgeable, you know, so all of a sudden, you know, you can make the sucker work a lot harder than what a lot of the other amplifiers do. Yeah. And also, there's a lot of speaker companies and control system companies in the custom install channel that offer an amplifier, you know, solution along the way, but their magic is speakers, or their magic may be control, you know, and, you know, when you say to people, hey, how would you like to have an amplifier? Would you rather buy an amplifier from a speaker company or an amplifier from an amplifier company?
Sure,
you know,
makes sense.
And it's a made USA amplifier. We make them, you know, right on the other side of the wall, as you have seen, you know. So there's a certain robustness that comes from that. And I do tell that a lot of our home dealers too, you know, because some of them do know about the car. You know, our home guys, engineers will design these and all that, and I'll let the car guys test them. If the car guys can't break it, they should do fine.
That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good test for that, for sure. So. So let's move on to some of the newer home stuff, or some of the other home products, as we get through today's training. So we've got some other stuff on the table here. So tell me about the one that's down below.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting product. You know, the Avalon.
Here, I'll take the Rialto out of the way for a second here.
This is the Avalon G4. Here, we'll give you. Here's the front, which is okay.
These look really cool when they're lit up, though. This whole bar lights up blue. They're pretty neat.
It's pretty sexy.
Yeah.
But the real magic some days is on the back. You know. Now, you know, this is a perfect example of audio control, you know, ingenuity going on. You know, where we said, hey, let's, you know, the market's saying, let's have an amplifier that can drive Atmos speakers. You know, but what else can we make that do? So originally, this is a 4-channel amplifier, and this is 230 watts times 4. So it's a workhorse. But we also realized people were saying, hey, we would like to run sometimes in 2-channel.
Sure. So
the guys, the engineering team designed this so that we can actually bridge it. So we can take the left and right channels and bridge it into 2 channels and get 300 or 600, depending on what kind of impedance you run down to. Wow. So it's a real workhorse amplifier from that. And then we took it a little step further and we added crossovers on here.
Wow. Which in the home audio world is pretty unique, right? I mean, in car audio, we almost expect that every amplifier is going to have a crossover. But in the home CI world, that is not the case, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times the crossover emanates from the receiver or the processor.
Sure.
But in this particular case, for instance, let's say you want to do a sub-sat. You know, to your point about earlier about people listening to 2 channels back in their house and stuff like that. Fun amplifier for it because I can run 2 channels on my left and right towers or left and right bookshelves, and then I can bridge this to run to a subwoofer. And then I use the crossover right here, and it may be redundant sometimes. They may have a crossover in the sub or not.
It's good fail-safe if nothing else. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if maybe you want to high-pass bookshelves or your speakers or something like that. So, and this is all part of the G4 series, and these are all Class H amplifiers.
Okay.
And there's a whole other day we'll talk about Class H.
Yeah, we talk about all the different classes another time.
It's an AB amplifier with a couple extra rails and power supply, kind of like a transmission on a car. So as it sees signal, it will increase the power draw, and it sees less signal at lower volume modes. It draws less. Interesting. So it runs cooler, which means we can get away with smaller heat sinks, less wear and tear. And that whole G4 series is part of the Avalon, and then the Pantages, and then the Savoy. Exactly.
So, and those are the ones I have up on the screen for you guys at home watching this. You'll see a few of them stacked up on the side of your screen and that sort of thing. Those are some of the different models in this lineup. So
then the question you're going to ask me is, hey, where did we come up with all those names?
I have actually asked this before, and I'm very curious. Let's hear your answer to it.
Oh, I just Googled it. No, I bought a book of movie theaters names years and years ago, and we've kind of worked our way through that. So the Savoy and the Avalon,
that's a great idea.
They all come from movie theaters. Yeah, exactly. So
what a cool idea. I like that.
You know, so it's a theater because we are making theater products in that regard.
Makes perfect sense.
So and sometimes
I love that.
If you grew up in certain communities, you have those theaters nearby.
Right.
You know, every now and then
we have you know, the Paramount or whatever here. You know, it's not a movie theater, but a theater nonetheless. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
they might have an Avalon theater nearby.
There's an Avalon.
There's an Avalon. I feel like in every state. There's got to be an Avalon theater in every state.
There's there's a Bijou down in Costa Oregon. There's a Rialto over in Spokane.
Sure.
Little theater, so
that's pretty cool.
But that's a big, the naming part of it kind of gets them, because all these products have personalities.
Sure.
And stuff like that. So, but lots of cool power. And there's a 4-channel, a 5, and a 7, which kind of lends itself to all the various theater applications.
Right, all the
that are
different
out there.
configurations
Oh my
and
gosh,
things
yeah,
like that.
That's some interesting stuff these days. So,
Yeah, definitely. Pretty cool.
And maybe we'll jump into the theater section here real quick.
Yeah,
too,
absolutely.
But I mean, one of the things was always interesting when I first started with audio control, and then I'd go out and start visiting with these home dealers, and people say, "Oh, I'm doing home theater," and you go, "Okay, what's that?"
Right.
And after 6 months of travel, the big epiphany was, hey, people are plugging their TVs into their stereo.
Sure.
What a concept.
Yeah, what an idea. Imagine that.
And back then it was a little unusual in the sense that typical the stereo stores, the hi-fi stores, didn't really sell televisions.
Oh, okay.
Other than maybe a high-end Proton or whatever, but most of them, TV stores were appliances, and audio at that time was
Gotcha.
something. So,
Two separate things.
yeah, so this home theater was all that kind of coming together.
Makes
it
sense.
started with 2 channels in the sub,
Yeah.
and then it went to Dolby Digital, or Dolby AC3, which is basically 2 channels that were then matrixed, or what's the term for creating center channel?
Like a phantom.
Yeah, phantom center channels and things like that. So, and then 5 channels for the sub, and then discrete channels, and then 7 channels. So
Sure.
you guys have probably heard 7.1, and then Atmos came along a few years ago, and we have 7.1.4. So now we have our main speakers, plus you can have 4 height speakers. That creates this extra expansiveness to it and stuff.
Yeah.
So our new products now, the new platform is a 16-channel platform.
Okay.
Yeah, so we keep notching it up into another level.
Of course.
The walls of these homes into Swiss cheese, so.
Yeah, so on that topic, tell me a little bit about the new Maestro platform. I mean, this is something really exciting that I think a lot of our home and CI dealers and anybody that's watching any of Steve Mead's latest videos,
Oh my gosh,
they've seen a little bit about some of this stuff and how cool it is. But this is pretty exciting to me because I of course, I have home theater in my own home, and I've seen a lot of receivers and stuff out there, but never quite seen one that does everything that these do. And these are not just receivers, because we have receivers, and then we also have frames, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the Maestro platform kind of covers a little bit of both concert and Maestro, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. No, and I think the overriding thing we call is the X series.
X series. Okay, that's a good way to describe it.
There's
Yeah.
an X series processors and XR series receivers.
Okay.
And then, first and foremost is the channel count,
Mhm.
and like I said, we went up to 16 channels. Now, before you guys go, well, I'll never use 16 channels.
Right.
The nice thing about it is they're mappable, so the installer can go in and say, hey, I want these channels to be 7.1 or 5.1, but I want 4 subwoofer outputs. We're seeing a lot of multiple sub things these days, because you can, in a theater, you can put one big giant sub in a room. As you guys know, there's big peaks and big dips, so there's going to be hot spots and stuff like that inside the room. So having multiple subs within a room is going to give you much more even bass distribution.
Right.
So having the multiple sub outs, and that's where we can map those. We'll map up. So 16 channels may seem like a lot, but you can use them up pretty quick.
Yeah, you can use those up pretty quick, or even designating a couple of them for an outdoor zone or something like that, right? Or an extra room or a kitchen or whatever.
Yep, and they have the VOG, as they call it, the voice of God
Okay.
speaker. So if you get into Oro 3D, you can have you have your centers and your lefts, rights, and surrounds, but you can also have the heights, and then you have a center middle, and that's the voice of God.
Middle.
Yes.
Interesting.
So if you're an Oro 3D or someone of a higher, and these days you between Atmos, and we support all those. We have the Dolby Atmos, IMAX Enhanced, which is a new video processing, DTSX, as well as Oro 3D. Those are the 3. There's probably some
ones.
eccentric one that
I'm sure. Yeah. I went with Atmos in my house when we built ours, and I have to say, going from a 5.1 system to a 5.1.2 is what I have. What a difference. Atmos is so cool. I love it. It's incredible.
And it gives you, sometimes with theaters, you have to turn it up fairly loud,
right,
to get the surround, because it's a fairly flat plane.
Sure.
So now all of a sudden with Atmos, you have this height, so it's this third dimensional, which is 3D audio. So all of a sudden you can play it at a balanced level, which won't kill your ears, and you can hear the gunshots going by, and the details and the raindrops. And,
you know how I knew it was great is my wife, who doesn't really care that much about this stuff. The first time we watched the movie together and it was all set up and all that, she went, wow, this is really cool. I'm like, okay, I've done it. That's the mission accomplished right there.
She wasn't talking about the lights or something.
No, that was it. She thought it was very cool. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 16 channels is certainly a big thing in there, the mappable thing, and that's because a lot of these products tend to get installed by custom installers who go out and do the programming and that. And then there's a calibration system we're now using called Dirac Live. And it's got a new thing called Dirac Live with bass control.
Okay.
And you know, and you guys can, mobile audio and everybody can kind of relate to this. Traditional calibration systems would basically go in, kind of do an auto EQ, and that was it. You know, Dirac was the first team that actually went out and said, okay, we're going to try and get a level, so everything's going to arrive at the same time, and then we're going to go in and we're going to measure time, so everything's going to arrive at the same time, and then we'll look at frequency, and then we'll create filters that will do that.
Wow!
So you take a microphone. Oh my God!
Yeah.
These guys. I mean, they and interestingly enough, the Dirac guys, I believe 15, 20 years ago, originally they developed this algorithm. And there wasn't a lot of traction in home and that, so they were in the car market. So if you bought, and they reached out to the Aston Martins, any of the Aston Martin owners, or Rolls Royce, or some of the European cars, the early ones that had premium sound systems in there, the back end of that was powered vis-a-vis Dirac guys.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's a cool little fact.
That's what they needed, I think, to kind of start the company and bootstrap and stuff like that. But there's only so much, as we know, in OEM integration and stuff, and then Dirac spooled off into standalone products, and now what we're using is the Dirac Live. And there's a new version of it now that is Dirac Live bass control. So, you know, Dirac, you measure it, looks at all your seating locations, it'll capture the data. You can create what you want that target curve to be, and it sends it up to the server, Dirac servers over in Europe, probably somewhere else, but Europe sounds good.
Sure.
It's a European company. And they make the adjustments, and it downloads the setting back on the processor. So, wow. And then you can create your target curve a little bit, and it won't force the speaker to do something it shouldn't do. Dirac Live bass control now will go out, and especially when you have multiple subwoofers, and allow you to kind of fine tune the crossover point between each sub and each main speaker. So the blending and the smoothing is a lot more definitive and stuff like that. So it's pretty nifty, you know.
That is cool.
And that's, you know, especially when you get into a system, and we see this in cars, obviously, with 8, 10, and 12 speakers. You get home theater when you got 8, 10, 12, 16 speakers, you know, you want everything to arrive in that listening area at the same time. So Dirac is something that, you know, we're one of the first adapters of the Dirac Live with bass control function in there. So it's really cool mainstay. And then, you know, processors support all the high-end 4K codecs and things like that, which are always kind of a complication. And then the Maestro X9, that's actually the new bad boy, you know, and that's got the new ESS Saber 9038 Pro DAC. That sounded pretty cool.
That did sound pretty cool. That
even
sounded
if it's
pretty
fictitious.
Cool. Even if I didn't know what it was, it sounded pretty cool.
So Google that, ESS Saber 9030. But it is the kind of the go-to DAC right now in the audio world. 140 dB of signal to noise. I think that the THD is like 0.0007. Wow. Yeah, but it's the one to go. So if you got that customer that says, hey, you know what, I want a good theater. At the same time, when I listen to 2-channel audio, and that's one of the things where our products can be cool, you know, I'd love to have the best audio performance on both sides. So the Maestro X9 is an amazing piece for that. You know, and then of course we got the Maestro X7, which is no slouch.
And I was just going to say, we actually got a question from somebody asking, what are the differences between the X7 and the X9, in particular the DACs? Is that the big difference?
That's a big difference.
That's the big difference.
And then the engineering department actually spends more time with the assembly of the X9, matching up all the capacitors and components and testing and stuff like that. So you're going to get that extra level of performance, or you know, or the difference between the X9 and the X7 is 2.
Smart Alec. And somebody else had asked, are there presets on the X9 for multiple seating arrangements?
You can have multiple presets in the Dirac. So Dirac will allow you to do that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, because that's actually a good question too, because it's not always just going to be, you know, maybe one person or whatever, the whole family or whatever the case may be.
I mean, and actually a little more common is the nighttime mode, or maybe you want to watch a movie theater and you turn it up, depending on the isolation between rooms. It will it'll bleed through the wall, wake up your kids and stuff. So you can have a mode where there's less bass, and you have a mode where there's more bass and stuff like that. So
very neat. And one other question I'll ask here before we move on is lip sync global by input or both?
Gosh, I think it's per input. That's a good question.
And I have no idea what that really, you know, I mean, I get the idea, the you know, the syncing between the audio and all that stuff, but.
Well, you have sound coming out of the speakers, and then you have the video coming out of the display, and sometimes with the larger format stuff, it'll take a little bit longer for the video to arrive in the audio. So you want to apply a little bit of delay So you get the, otherwise you end up with that Godzilla thing where,
Right, yeah, it doesn't quite match up. Sure. So tell us about something cool and new that's coming out, something that is fresh, freshly coming out, something you're excited about.
Well, this is really brand new. This one here. In our spirit of amplifiers, we were rounding out the line. I mean, it's been a busy year, as you know, Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, between the theater products, the 3 receivers and the 2 pre-pros, 3 new theater amplifiers in the G4.
It's a lot of new products.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And these are big. Every one of these takes a lot of engineering
Of
time
course.
and stuff like that. So fortunately, we have some really good folks working here. One of the additions to the family, once again, from listening to dealers, was subwoofer amplifiers.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of active subwoofers out
Of course,
there.
but passives are becoming more popular, right?
Quite a bit,
Yeah.
especially distributed audio.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people will put speakers in their room and they'll say, all right, I'm going to crank them up, but they're really missing that bottom octave or 2,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's where bass helps out. So we just help, a lot of speaker manufacturers once again said, hey, we're selling an amp.
Right.
But they really weren't the most robust amplifiers.
Yeah, they just had an amp because they needed an amp of some sort, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those, we bought it from somebody or whatever. So,
Sure.
So we designed this from the ground up from scratch, including the amp card that we're using inside here. So it runs, remarkably cool from that standpoint. This is the RS500. This is a 500 watt mono block, which doesn't seem like a lot to you car people. So 500 watts, what is that?
You can do a lot with 500 watts in cars, but
But the thing about this is it's rated at 4 and 8 ohms, but this is also stable down to 2 ohms.
Which in the home world is not common, right?
Not very common.
Yeah, in the car world, of course, we run things down to 1 ohm or quarter ohm and SPL things and all this crazy stuff. How much power do we get at an eighth of an ohm, but in the home world, normally it's 8 or 4, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Or you
may
end up having to put 1 amp per woofer and stuff like that.
Sure.
So once again, you have that issue with, all right, where do I put it into the
rack?
rack?
How many components in this rack are we going to have?
Exactly. Yeah. And the 500, because it's 2 ohm stable, and it's got a big brother, the RS1000, that'll be out in about 60 days, but they're both 2 ohm stable. So you can double up on the amount of woofers you have in a room.
Sure.
And play that lower impedance capabilities.
Now, does this deliver 500 watts at all impedances then?
At all impedances, yeah.
That's really cool. So constant wattage, so 500 watts regardless of 8, 4, or 2 ohm.
Correct.
That's really, really cool.
And it has, to set it up too, you'll notice the noted absence of switches and knobs
and
all that. There is a, backwards here.
Right back here.
Thank you. The network port. So with the network port, I can log onto this amplifier and I can set equalization curves. I can set the crossover points.
Wow.
I can apply, different levels of boost and things like that.
Sure.
And then we have some speaker companies that we work with, like James and Origin Acoustics and Triad and Dyne Audio, who have actually provided us with parameters for their speakers. So we have a library in here in our Sound Partners program where people can just download the settings. And it's a starting point.
Sure.
Sometimes you set it and it works fine for the room and off you go, but then you can go back and fine tune it based on the room itself. So,
but I mean, that's really cool if you think about that. I mean, you just bought your new Dyne Audio woofer, you got your RS500 to go with it, and if you're somebody that doesn't know a lot about this stuff, especially in the home world, you basically download a settings packet and away it goes. I mean, it's more or less set up to a baseline at least to where it's going to be good performance right out of the gate. That's pretty neat. So, and so this is the RS500, the RS1000. You said maybe 60 days or so out, something like that.
It's a 1,000 watt one.
What's the RS? What's the RS come from, Chris?
Ah, gotcha. So, well, another classic product, the AudioControl, the Richter scale.
The Richter scale.
So, and we were in a whole earthquake mode, epicenter.
Right.
Richter scale. And the Richter scale was a bass EQ basically. So it was 6 bands of EQ plus a 24 dB per octave crossover for home audio.
Sure.
Kind of what an EQX is basically.
Gotcha.
Not as much.
Okay.
But it was in a chassis. It had a really cool logo with the Richter scale on it.
That is cool.
Seismic thing and stuff like that. So we sold that product in retail, and a lot of the EQ settings that are on the Richter scale is kind of the default EQ in a lot of our products.
Oh,
so when it came time to create a subwoofer amplifier, it just seemed very appropriate.
Yeah, have a little throwback to the name.
RS
Yeah,
exactly.
and I see it does say Apollo back there too, which again would be a theater.
Exactly.
There you go.
That's a code.
Yeah.
That's all other stuff.
But
this is also, it's got speaker level in, it's got line level in, it's got balanced ins, so we can tap off of receivers, we can receive signals right out of the pre-pros going into this. So.
Which again is pretty unique. I mean, I don't know, is high level input real common in home and CI product?
Well, if you want to tap into a, let's say you've got a distributed audio amplifier,
sure,
like one of our director architects, and you know what, you've got a bunch of channels, and we do have pass-throughs and all that kind of stuff, but if you want to add an extra sub onto it,
yeah,
that's valuable from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Or if you've got a receiver, some of the simple two-channel receivers may not necessarily have a preamp output, you can grab the two-channel speaker level. And you know, in that active circuitry that we use in LC2Is and things like that is very similar to what we're using inside here too.
Very cool.
Makes it, they call it a high Z connectivity. So,
okay, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Let's see if there's other questions on here before we move on. I think that's the majority of the questions and everything like that. So where do you see, before we wrap things up here, so where do you see like some of the you know, future tech and stuff like that coming for home and the mobile side too? Where do you see some of this stuff going? Obviously, you've been here with AudioControl much longer than I have, but longer than most of the guys here. And you've seen kind of some fads and trends come and go and things like that. What do you see? What do you see on the horizon for home and car?
Well, I think kind of broad strokes is the different layers of network connectivity. You know, both the networks that are in a car,
sure,
you know, and how we all communicate over that. You know, less and less wire,
right,
more fiberish kind of things.
Sure.
And whatnot.
Yeah,
so,
canvas networks
exactly,
and all that stuff.
And how devices go on those networks, you know, whether it be the amplification, the source units and stuff like that. Well, maybe not so much the source,
sure,
but all the other components and pieces that go with that.
Yeah.
And on the home side, I mean, while networks are definitely in play as a big part of the business right now, we'll see things like Dante technology, you know, and Dante is a commercial technology that you can take a device, like one of our amplifiers, for instance, and you put the amplifier on the network, and then you can have another amplifier on the network somewhere else, and they'll actually talk to each other via the network. Wow. So instead of running tons and tons of wires and cables and RCA jacks and stuff like that, you know, still communicate over the network. So you'll see more of that. No, networks need to be, these aren't your Comcast box network. You know, they've got to be robust networks, and I think you'll see some of that kind of technology
kind of trickle down.
Oh yeah, in the mobile audio too. I mean, I think everybody wants to be the gatekeeper of those kind of things. You know, in terms of how to get signal from point A to point B. Yeah. So, but, you know, connectivity is, you know, I mean, that's the key, obviously, in mobile audio too. Is, you know, when someone has a car, I mean, we need to make sure that everybody's comfortable. So when they come in with a 2021 blah blah blah, as dealers and integrators, and say, oh yeah, drop your car off, we can make it work. As opposed to, ooh, let me go spend a week on the internet, go to 5 webinars and research it. You know, so what is that? And I've seen, it's neat to see with LC7Is and DMA10s and 608s that comfort level of connecting with all these various cars and fine tuning and calibrating gets higher and higher every year. So.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the fun things for me as a trainer is going around to all these different shops and stores and kind of talking to them about this stuff, is being able to say, you know, with enthusiasm and with some certainty, go, look, if you sell one of our products, it's going to work in this car. You know, there is no, oh, well, if it's factory this or aftermarket that. No, it doesn't matter. We've got all the input stage. It doesn't matter. It's going to work. I mean, that's kind of one of the fun parts about being able to talk about some of this stuff.
And that's where products like, I mean, one of the other products that you asked me about earlier that I got excited about was the 3050 for years.
Yeah.
You know, which I thought, wow, nothing will ever replace that.
Sure.
And then the DMRT came along.
Right.
Thought, wow, this is, you know, and that certainly notched up with the 3050 because it's all about measuring.
Right.
Capturing the data, and then based on that data, you can make an educated proposal to a customer, you know, or say, hey, so knowing that you have an RTA, you can actually measure the speaker wires, you can take a look at what's coming in and have a good idea of what it's going to take to make that system come together. And I know there's a lot of RTAs out there. I used to go and see dealers and they go, just let's get your RTA and measure this thing. I don't have an RTA. I go, yeah, you do. I sold it to you. I have a meter. I go, let's put it on the RTA.
Right, let's put it on the RTA function. And there you go.
I think Todd Ramsey and I talked about this kind of stuff some days ago. Guys, you got these tools, you know.
Right. You just have to use them.
Yeah, the DMRTA is one of those that take it to that next level. Where, hey, as a dealer, I can measure it, I can identify, and I can make my guys feel comfortable with it. And hopefully all your guys, not just the one guy that can calibrate the car. And the car, you know?
And I think that's an important piece of that too, is whether you're a home or a CI or a mobile dealer, whatever it is, everybody on the crew needs to be comfortable with that stuff, in my opinion. You know, maybe not the sales guys as much, but all of your techs anyway should know how to use an RTA and how to use
it's got to be a common. That whole thing's got to be a common skill.
Too many shops, there's the one guy, the one tuner or whatever it is. I mean, I helped a dealer yesterday with a DMRTA and a DSP product and stuff, and it was, when I was done with the call, it was just really cool to be able to think, 5 years ago, this couldn't have happened. Because I was able to look at his RTA, help him analyze the signals, use the oscilloscope and all those things, and 5 years ago, that couldn't have been a thing. So it's pretty slick. And I think the DMRTA has found, big success in the mobile market, but I think there's a lot of home and CI guys too that should be using one or having something like that. I mean, I know we're seeing some dealers that are kind of
yeah, and I think as you get more involved in room design, I mean, Dirac has its own calibration system there.
Sure.
When you're trying to figure out speaker placements in some of these larger projects, or with distributed audio, that I mean, people don't want to, you put distributed audio in a room like this with carpet and stuff like that, it's okay, but move these up to be 12 and 18-foot ceilings and put tile and marble and glass,
floors, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll know with your ear, but an RTA is definitely a tool to go in and identify the peaks and dips and stuff that you want to kind of remove from from that, give it a nice balance. So
yeah, super valuable, especially depending on, like you said, depending on the project. And I think a lot of guys get hung up with thinking home theater, but I mean, especially the distributed audio products are going into all sorts of retail environments, commercial environments, all sorts of things. So
people want music,
everywhere,
and they want it to sound. I mean, their expectations too. I mean, for what they get out of the speaker system, it's, hey, I'm going to spend especially right now, I'm going to spend a lot of time in my house.
Right. Yeah.
We're seeing a
huge
interest in theater because people are like, hey, next time I go see a movie, I maybe want to do it at home as opposed to go somewhere else. So it'd be nice to have a really cool kick-butt theater inside my house, kind of like Steve Means. Everybody should buy Steve
Absolutely,
Means.
yeah. Everybody should have that system,
exactly.
right?
That's your basic system.
That's the basic
starter system.
Well, on that note, that's been about an hour for us today. We like to keep these trainings right around there. So I want to thank you guys all for joining us today. I appreciate it. And thank you, Chris Kane, for joining me today. This was fun. So yeah, of course, if, let's see here. There is one question. Any plans to enable voice casting by Josh AI?
Actually, we have a Josh driver developed that allows it to operate our Director series of amplifiers.
Cool.
And it also will control our home theater processors and platforms.
Oh, very cool.
Josh, I think Josh has I think that's on the Josh portal, if I remember correctly.
Nice. So we're already there.
Yeah. If you saw that little thing upstairs that was next to the Echo, that's a Josh.
Yeah. And I had seen it up there. I just didn't know if we were done with that or if that was a thing yet. So very cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
well, thank you guys.
Voice is big. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us this week. If this is your first one of our trainings, thanks for coming with us this time. If you've been with us for the last 14 or 15 weeks, thank you for the support. We're doing these trainings every Thursday at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. We do them for about an hour, and there's a different topic every week. So thanks again for joining us, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Matthew.
Bye-bye.